Hello here and welcome again to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. We are nearly a week away from the end of spring practice, the red-white spring game. We're off Easter, boys. Sipple brought his leftover ham up to the office for everybody to enjoy.
I did not. I did have leftover ham, though. And macaroni. I can't say macaroni. Macaroni.
You say like macaroons.
The kids say macaroni, and I've said that for so long. Macaroni.
But we're back. Weekend was off for Nebraska. Back to work this week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We heard from Matt Rule, though, again to start the week. And, you know, this is the part of the show I like to call opening headlines. And I think this is going to be the headline, really, not just for Nebraska, but for all of college football as we embark on another new era, the spring portal window. It's a 2-week period that begins Saturday, April 15th, where the NCAA will open the transfer portal for business for just 2 weeks. Well, here's the deal with Nebraska. They will be practicing for 1 full week within this open portal window. And then after the spring game's over on April 22nd, they'll have another full week of that window being open. Man, and I asked Matt Rule about this, Sip. I mean, I'm intrigued how it's going to play out, not just here nationally, but within their own locker room. Because if you think you're leaving, why would you scrimmage on Saturday?
Scrimmage Saturday or scrimmage in the spring game. So Matt Rule told you, I haven't thought about it. He added, it's going to happen. There's going to be guys.
They'll show up Saturday morning
that end up in the portal from Nebraska. We don't know who that is. But the fascinating thing to me is, now, I mean, you think about the competing entities here, the competing mindsets. You have a coach on one hand who's trying hard in his first year to build something strong that looks presentable for the spring game, but then also for the fall. So, and then the competing entity of there's some guys on his roster that are thinking about getting out. He doesn't want to think about those guys, not right now. I mean, he's all about moving this program forward. It's really I'm not going to be critical of the portal at this point. There's no good in it, but these are the kind of situations that are awkward, especially for a guy who's just inherited a roster, and there's so much work to be done, and you need all these people pulling in the same direction, and you just naturally don't have that because there's some guys thinking about their next stop.
Yeah, and I guess there's two sides to it too, because Nebraska's hoping to benefit from this next round.
Good point.
Of portal waves too. So
That's
I mean, there's pros and cons, and right now you're kind of seeing the bad part of it, where this roster retention and management and getting guys to stay bought in that might, in theory, have 1 foot out the door, but then you're also starting to get word on potential options that might fill holes in your roster that not only replace the guys that are leaving, but upgrade at spots that you needed to address. So, it's just the way the game is now, and you can like it or hate it, whatever it is, but it's the way that you have to operate now. So for Matt Rule, you just take it as it is. You know that guys are going to leave. That's not a secret. They have to lose players that are on scholarship in order to get down to 85 to begin with. Yeah. They had to upgrade at some positions post spring. So, it's just kind of the natural progression of this that, we'll see just where it ultimately shakes out. But I think that you just kind of take it as it is.
Well, and I think when you go back to December, there was the 1 month period where that was open. And that's very rushed for a lot of guys because, they're just finishing classes, the season. Now this is the time where they had a whole semester to think. And I think the thought is there's going to be some better players that go in this 2-week period than maybe what we saw in the winter.
Is that right? You think so?
Yeah. I mean, somebody in the program told me that today at practice. So they think that there'll be a better crop of guys that go in around the country now than maybe December. And I do think you look back, it was pretty light. Like the offensive line was light in December. There wasn't a lot.
The players available
that you could go and pick. And that teams did a really good job of maybe retaining their roster in December. But now you're going to be all right, guys don't like their situation or don't like what's going on at their school that they're at. And you're going to see some guys pop in. And those names are going to be hot. I mean, these names that go in, it's going to, I mean, just like what Rob, and we'll talk about basketball later in the show, but what's going on in basketball, I think it's going to be like that or even at a higher level with football.
And a lot of these players already kind of know where they're going.
A lot of times.
Feelers.
A lot of times they can't talk to anybody, but their people can.
Yeah.
And their people do more often than not, especially the higher profile guys.
Yeah. And if you're a Nebraska fan, you hope that this staff is talking to some high profile impact players right now through intermediaries or however it's done. I think you got to do it. You got to play the game
because they need a D lineman still.
Yeah, I think
they probably need another O lineman.
Yeah,
but who can you find that can be ready to go? Because we saw not Elijah Judy, but Stephon Wynn and Devin Drew last year. They were just serviceable bodies. I mean, they weren't here long enough to truly develop to be ready to play in the Big Ten in like 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see now Drew has moved on. Wynn is back. And, Wynn is a house. I mean, it looks to me like he got quite a bit bigger. He's a big dude now. I'd like to see maybe him turn it up, maybe show something that he really hasn't shown in his career. I mean, he'd be at Alabama if they wanted him. I mean, you don't say goodbye to big bodies like that easily if he's helping you. So I mean, I kind of like to see Wynn turn it up in his last year in college.
Yeah, like Kane Williams came with him at that, and
Williams.
You don't really hear his name.
Nope.
And the other,
you haven't heard it at all.
The other storyline, and it's the rule that's in the college football rule book now. When there's a coaching change, the head coach in a new situation has the authority now to ask a player not to come back, and then the option is you can go in the portal. Or you can stay at Nebraska and keep all of your money, your scholarship and your stipend. But
you don't count against the scholarship.
You don't count against that. So that's going to be going on here before we blink our eyes as well. I mean, that will happen after the spring game's over. And I'm sure it's a numbers game. I mean, I'm sure they have to really kind of look at the overall numbers and where it's at. But there's going to be guys, obviously, that are going to be asked, like, hey, you can stay at Nebraska, but we don't have a spot for you on this 85.
And that was one of the things Matt Rule said on Tuesday was, after that week after the spring game is when he's going to have the one-on-one meetings with pretty much everyone. And he's said it from the jump that he's going to be direct and honest with these guys about where they stand and what their future is in this program and how, where they stand at their depth in the depth chart at their respective positions. So, I think that's what you have to do in this day and age. You can't sugarcoat it for guys because then you're going to lead them on and you're just going to make matters worse. So you have to be open and honest and tell guys exactly how it is. Because that level of transparency, if you lie and you try to be sneaky about it, it's going to come back to you. Word's going to get out that players can't trust you. And in transfer portal recruiting, trust is as significant of a factor as anything.
There you go.
You're listening here to the HuskerOnline show as we move in. One final thought here in opening headlines. Spring game format. We're still a little bit ways out, but sounds like we might see live quarterbacks in that game. But we don't know if they're going to have enough players available to do a true game. It might have to be offense versus defense or something. And he kind of put that out there in so many words on Tuesday that we could still make it a game if it's offense versus defense. But that offensive line number situation alone,
right?
I don't know how
you're right.
You can't divide up into two. If those guys in green aren't playing, which is 3 or 4 of those guys are the 14, how do you have? Are you going to tell those linemen they got to play 100 snaps each?
No, you can't. I was just going to say they're in the neighborhood of 10 available right now. Yeah. Offensive linemen, how do you do that?
No,
it would literally be 100 snaps per guy,
right?
At that point,
no.
And you can't do that.
You don't do that.
Doesn't seem worth the risk.
So at that point, you can do so. If you're a walk-on in the program, you're going to get a lot of reps in this spring game at some of these key positions. But these quarterbacks and that will be interesting to talk next week more, just how they kind of divide this up and rep these quarterbacks. And I mean, we all assume Jeff Sims will be the first QB out of the gates, but who knows?
Well, I mean, if you look at and we do get a glimpse of the early stages of practice. We did today, Tuesday. He's always first in line in drills. And today it was he and then Heinrich Harburg and then Chuba and then Torres. I think that's meaningful. I mean, the coaches don't have it that way for nothing. So yeah, I think Sims would be your starter if they played tomorrow.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk more offensive storylines that we've learned here out of the week in spring practice. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washad as making our way through talking spring practice, nearly a week away from the red-white spring game. We talked this week to wide receivers coach Garrett McGuire, who's now, a full month into spring practice. It's the first time we've talked to him since the one other time he spoke to the media. And, the more you hear, the more you see, the more you learn. This is an impressive young coach. And, I think a lot of people at the beginning just looked at the age and maybe question it on the outside. But when you hear coaches that were at that coaches clinic and, they watch his presentation, they watch him coach, you hear the current players. You heard Gatlin Bear in Robin's chair when he was up here talking to us from Burley, Utah, or Burley, Idaho, excuse me. He
said it was going to be interesting to learn with him. And
so this is a guy that continues to get a lot of praise as somebody that really wasn't on anyone's radar until about 3 months ago.
We got a lot of praise today from Matt Rule. A lot of praise. Rule also said, you could tell Rule was irritated about people questioning Garrett McGuire. He's 24. And it's okay. I mean, it's perfectly fair to question that age. I mean, it is. He's a young guy. And you wonder how that's going to be. Rule said it affected recruiting, those questions. And he kind of didn't like the fact it came from in-house, which he means the Nebraska media. Some of it.
What does that mean, though? Like, is he talking about, like, some of the receivers locally? There's a couple good receivers they've offered, like Davon Hall, Isaiah McMorris.
I don't know what it meant, but Rule said that it affected it. So it's sort of interesting that he said that. He also said that, look, this guy coached in the NFL players making millions of dollars responded well to him. He said Garrett McGuire has a hard edge. He's not just a hype man. I mean, this is what Rule said. It's just not a hype man. He's got a hard edge.
Yeah. And just watching him for the brief instances that we have, you can see a little bit of that. You watch him coach on the field, he doesn't look like a 24-year-old kid, who's in over his head, that is having a hard time getting his players' attention. Guys listen to him. He's thorough and direct with how he communicates on the field. And I think guys respond to that. And I think the other element to that is, while there might be some negatives in terms of his experience, I think there's positives in his ability to relate with guys differently than a coach 20 years older than him, to where he's got an office that's stocked full of snacks that guys feel comfortable going in there and just hanging out. Like, not even guys in his own room. Like Eric Gilbert comes there every single morning to hang out with them. And I think that's really important to establish that relationship. For especially a coach that is that young, you got to find a way to connect with guys. And I think his ability to bond with guys as people is what's making that difference, where he's building that trust, where what he might lack in terms of resume and track record, he's making up for with just the personal relationships and ability to connect with guys, and going to Marcus Washington and saying, hey, you have a 1-year-old son. That's your why. And like using that as a motivator. Like most 24-year-old kids don't think like that. I mean, he's coaching well beyond his years.
Yes.
Who doesn't like a cabinet full of snacks? We have them here, and Steve Sipple, that's why he shows up on.
I mean, what's the first thing I do every time I walk in? Just straight for the cabinet.
Rips 3 bags of jerky.
Yeah, ripped
a pot full of Nespresso pods and a cabinet full of snacks. You get Steve Sipple up here every day.
The espresso, this is the best I felt all day. And what time is it?
It's always here. It's always waiting for you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
You're listening here to the Husker Online Show, and let's talk more about some of these receivers. Matt Rule did get into the discussion about Billy Kemp. We talked to Joshua Fleeks this week. We talked to Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. There's a lot there, Sip, with just some of these guys, and it sounds like a position of strength.
Well, yeah, and you didn't mention the leading receiver by far.
Marcus Washington.
Yeah, Marcus Washington.
Xavier Betts.
Yeah, Marcus Washington by far the leading returning receiver. 31 catches last year, 491 yards and a touchdown. I mean, the next on the list is Alante Brown with 12. In fact, what I'm getting at is Marcus Washington gets overlooked a little bit. And the previous staff liked him because he was in what little practices we saw last year, Washington was very engaged, enthusiastic guy, all in. Had a good year. Now, if you're Marcus Washington, you want to turn it up. I mean, now you want to go from 31 to 50 catches. We'll see how the ball gets spread around, but he's a good-looking player, 6'2", 190 pounds. He doesn't have that kind of Trey Palmer speed, but he's and you heard Garrett McGuire say it, he's a competitive sucker. He is. Washington, we watched him all last year. That's a good description. He's a competitive sucker.
Yeah, and he's motivated.
Really? By his son.
And McGuire's found ways to find those motivators. So I think that's certainly promising on that front. But also, Sean mentioned earlier that they're kind of toning things down with Billy Kemp, that he's kind of proven himself as that known commodity. Like they know what they have with him.
It kind of is what they thought he was.
They don't need him getting 50 reps a scrimmage or anything like that. So as a result of that rest of that receiver room, which is loaded, what they have, like 15 scholarship guys, so I mean, like, there's a lot of bodies in that room, but they're all getting reps today or Tuesday. McGuire said that they got 180 reps in their Thursday practice this past Thursday, and each guy got about 30 to 40 reps per receiver. So I mean, talk about opportunity. I mean, you're talking about the Sean Hardys and the Victor Jones Juniors, like guys that aren't really getting talked about much.
Yeah, we don't talk about
They're at least getting a chance, and they're getting out there. They're getting reps, meaningful reps, getting on film. So I think with the way that Nebraska is practicing, while it seems like a huge number that they have a receiver, they're finding ways to maximize every second of practice and getting guys at least a shot to prove what they can do.
Well, and how about, the walk-ons too? Ty Hahn, who he was one of the best athletes to come out of 8-man in the state. Carter Nelson trumps that now.
Johnson Brock,
but he was a 1,000-yard receiver, led his team to a state championship, and he was going to win the 100, I believe. I mean, he was that good all around. He's a 10-8 guy. But then the Bullocks, not only Alex, but his brother John.
Alex is the receiver.
But the two brothers from Creighton Prep, they're valuable walk-ons in this program, and both could play this year.
Yeah, and that's not us saying that. Rule, unsolicited, said the
went
guys
out of his way.
Yeah, unsolicited. Rule said the guys that don't get talked about enough are Alex Bullock and Ty Hahn. That's, for him to say that, just bring it up. He was asked about the receivers, but he said right off, the guys who don't get talked about enough are Alex Bullock and Ty Hahn. That is a feather in those guys' cap for the head coach to do that.
So the COVID year, you weren't with us at that point. Obviously,
I was alive.
You were at another news outlet.
R.I.P.
We went to a lot of high school games that year.
I was with us
because I was determined to keep content flowing for our website. So all of us on our staff went out to different games, and I went to a bunch of Creighton Prep games. And they played Lincoln Southeast that year on that field with Sam Sledge, AJ Rollins,
Alex
Bullock,
John Bullock.
Then you had Gatula, and you had some really good players, Applegate, from Southeast. All these guys on the field. Alex Bullock was the best football player on the field. The game he had a couple receiving touchdowns. He had an interception. I mean, these were like game-changing plays where he was making plays all over the field. Like Creighton Prep, he was their best player on that team. Like when you went to the games, he was clearly a guy that got hurt because of COVID. And he's not 6'2".
He is 6'2".
Oh, he is
6'2", 195. That's what he's listed.
Okay. Well,
that's what he's listed.
His measurables and he just doesn't jump off the page.
Right.
But when you watch him play, he jumped off the page.
That's interesting, Sean. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so I'm excited for that kid because he kind of gambled, bet on himself to walk on here, and he's doing it. I mean,
his brother is.
Like, I was surprised he didn't get some quality Dakota offers and other places because he could play at those schools.
The staff likes those Bullock boys. They really do. Those are, like, you can tell there's certain guys this staff has picked out that they noticed.
There's Alex right there.
There he is. They like Alex Bullock. They like Heinrich Harburg.
When did Harbaugh have a kid coming?
They like Harbaugh. They like Heinrich Harburg. They like that running back, number 22. Help me.
Gabe Urban Jr.
Yeah, they like they like those guys. They bring those guys up all the time.
On that note, let's close on this. Running back, A.J. Allen.
Yeah. Quiet.
A lot of connected dot, a lot of conspiracy theorists out there wondering what's going on because he's kind of been limited. He's not been discussed much. We know what's coming April 15th.
Oh boy.
I mean, that's a guy I think everyone will watch kind of where he's at. He was repping in practice on Tuesday, but with a green jersey on.
So he went from yellow, which is off limits practice, completely to green. So he was practicing. He looked good.
There he is right there.
Yeah, he looked good running the ball in green. I don't know. I
just hate speculating on that sort of stuff. I mean, what if he had like a head injury or something?
Yeah.
He was forced to sit out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, so we saw him last week in the yellow jerseys. Then that night, I think that night he's posting videos of him like dunking a basketball, like at the rec or something like that. So I mean, I don't know. And so that probably leads further into the conversation about why he's out, but you just never know.
No.
And we just not informed enough on what's actually happening to start jumping to conclusions, especially with something like that, suggesting that someone has got a foot out the door. Like I'm not ready to do that.
No, the only thing that, it's kind of curious because they've talked so extensively about Gabe Irvin. Anthony Grant, not so much.
But we know what Grant can do.
Yeah, it came off a suspension. He comes off a suspension. AJ Allen, I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of a mystery right now. And Rule was asked about him today and just stuck to kind of the injury news. He doesn't volunteer much information on him. So it is something to watch.
All right, when we come back, we're going to shift over to defense. We'll talk defensive storylines next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, talking defensive storylines out of spring practice. I want to start right here with just physicality, tackling, the way they've practiced. They've gotten after it. And you see even the videos. I mean, you have Heinrich Harburg going downfield, making lead blocks on guys as a quarterback. But it's been a big point to kind of ramp up the physicality with this defense and how they've gone about practicing over the course of the spring.
Yeah, I think it has. And it was kind of refreshing today. In these media sessions, you often get a lot of kind of philosophical questions and sort of, I don't know, they just sort of lead to nowhere. And somebody just said, "Hey, how's the tackling?" It was really refreshing. Like, oh yeah, we're actually going to talk about some football part here. Nice. And Rule said some sort of illuminating things. He says we're not tackling a lot live, but we have. They're teaching a new way of tackling, and some guys are taking bad angles. But the big thing, he says, it's a very willing tackling team, and they're not soft. Now, I don't know what if you watch the video, he kind of got into how they're going about it, but it's hard to convey.
Yeah, basically he talked about the balance of, leading with the head, which to reduce head injuries, but now you're seeing more labrum injuries and shoulder injuries than ever because of the emphasis of leading with the shoulder.
Yeah.
And the fact that shoulder pads are now smaller than they've ever been,
right?
Because of the style and speed element. So it's a fine line now and what's the safest approach for tackling. And so there's all sorts of that in terms of just the normal fundamentals of bringing down a ball carrier. So a work in progress. The scrimmage this coming Saturday, he said, is going to be really big as far as that is concerned.
Because they're going to hit.
Yeah, they're going to hit a lot. They're going to run a lot of plays, and it's going to be a lot of live tackling.
It's a big scrimmage.
That, I think, is going to be that next real turning point in really evaluating how good of a tackling team this group actually is. And while it has been limited, he said that what they've seen has been good overall. I mean, certainly not perfect, but I think what you mentioned, Sip, the most important part is that it's a willing group. I mean, they're not going to shy away from contact once they're in that element.
Yeah.
And that scrimmage on Saturday is kind of the pinnacle of spring practice. Yes, the spring game is the show, but that is the pinnacle. Like that is where you take the gloves off and say, let's go.
You'll find out about some players, good or bad. And you're right, Sean, that's always the way it is. The final scrimmage of the spring is the key.
It's the true spring game.
Way more important than the spring game.
Key evaluation point.
And what you'll hear on the actual spring game is like, we simplified things and just wanted the athletes to be athletes. Let them play. Where like they're going to run a lot more terminology and their concepts in the actual scrimmage. And that was the Zach Taylor scrimmage, the legendary 05 Nebraska scrimmage where Bill Callahan scrimmaged his team for 3.5 hours.
And they determined that Zach's toughness showed. They wanted to put those quarterbacks in difficult situations. Yeah, you're right. The spring game, there's meaning to it because you do see the athletes. You can see them. You see the guys show out their athleticism. Like you will see Jeff Sims show out on that day. Now, maybe some others will too.
We saw some other guys back, by the way, on the field. Blaze Gunnerson back out there practicing. And this is a guy that's battled injuries really since high school.
Yeah.
And you just hope that he can get himself back. Brody Tagaloa was back in red practicing, and he's now a D lineman, no longer a tight end. He had an injury as a senior in high school. He was shelved last year, had been shelved at the beginning of the spring. He's impressive looking kid. Like, can they get some repetition out of Brody Tagaloa?
Yeah, Gunnerson and Tagaloa are both good looking players. But
especially Gunnerson. I mean, he looks
really?
he looks like a Big Ten D lineman now.
He does.
I mean, he's got the stature to him. Just need to stay on the field, stay healthy. Omar Brown and Javin Wright are both practicing, but in green jerseys. I think Omar's doing maybe a little bit more than Javin, at least as far as what we've been able to see. But other than that, like, they're pretty healthy on the defensive side. I mean, most of the other green jerseys and notable yellow jersey guys are on the offensive side of the ball. So good spot for the defense to be in at this point in spring ball.
Omar Brown, Javin Wright are two guys that have been injured a lot. And it's notable, and I say that because they're both really talented.
Yes.
Omar Brown's a senior, a veteran player. You just like him to see him shake that stuff off and become that player that you have kind of in your mind's eye. Javin Wright's the same way. He started last year against Wisconsin, had one start, and again, big, good-looking player. I mean, you use him on the punt team to rush the punter because of his length and athleticism. But, man, you like to see it start showing up on defense. But on the other hand, they got a lot of defensive backs. It's not like there's any code red. If those two guys don't play, they're fine. I mean it. I mean, they got enough guys back there.
So when you look at the defensive secondary, are we assuming today that Malcolm Hartstug is the opposite corner, or is he a safety? And if it's not Hartstug at corner, who is that corner? Is it Tommy Hill? Is it somebody else? That opposite of Quentin Newsome. We don't really have a beat on that.
No, we don't. We need to get a beat on that.
That's one I don't really, because I don't feel like corner is where they want Hartstug long term. I think
they're really moving him around, right?
I think they've got other plans for it.
It seems like it, doesn't it? What it could a guy like Taman Lynham rise?
You don't hear his name though. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. But
no, I know you don't though. You're right. You don't. But he looks the part.
We'll get Tony White one more time.
Still wonder what Marquise Buford's situation is like, and how does he impact?
He can play corner.
That discussion.
He played safety last year, but he can play corner.
And that's where he started out at when he got to Nebraska.
Corner.
Yeah,
he can play corner. Tommy Hill, you wonder about. I mean, the last staff just loved him. I still have that memory of Fisher saying he's a dog.
His name was going to be on the stadium someday.
Tom
he said
Fisher
that.
is a dog.
That, I mean, I told him his name could be on that stadium if he plays someday. The way I think. I mean, so why did that go south?
Yeah. Well, it did, and I don't know why. Well, you saw why. You saw against Georgia Southern why it went.
It got
in Oklahoma.
You hear stories that got a little heated in practice one day with Fisher and Tommy, and then that's when he made the move to receiver. But the move to receiver just ended up being
not when it wasn't much.
A lot of empty calories there. He just wasn't.
Yeah, a lot of vanilla Oreos. Yeah, not much there. Or regular Oreos. I mean, those are good too. But I really like the vanilla. But yeah, there wasn't much to talk about. But it doesn't mean his career's over.
No.
We'll see where that goes. But that's a good thing for us to ferret out. We got to get that.
Like, get a beat on that second corner.
Yeah, second corner.
Like Braxton Clark, is he a guy that really? Because this is his 6th year. Like, what's his outlook right now? If he's not in their plan, I mean, this decision that they have to make on players that will be asked back or not, you have to. I mean, just look at those safety and some of these defensive back numbers. Like, that's a position that you have to think there's going to be some attrition.
Yeah. I don't want to speculate on who.
No, but just look. I mean, the numbers alone dictate that there's going to be some
safeties, a lot of safeties.
Mhm.
I mean, and that, well, but here's the thing. They've added the rover position. So you effectively have 3 safeties now. So it's good they have a lot of those bodies. Corner's the position you wonder about. Newsom's locked in. As one
Omar
corner.
Brown's locked in.
You think?
Like to play and be on the field. Yeah, I do.
Do you?
I think he'll get on the field.
Okay.
They're going to, I mean, they're high on Omar Brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think they are?
Yeah, I do. I just don't know if he's a lock.
To be a starter or to play?
I mean, you got Gifford, you got Miles Farmer.
No, that's a guy.
You got Buford, you got Isaac. Yeah, Gifford.
You don't hear Gifford's name much.
No, you don't.
Which is interesting to me because.
But it's sometimes, Sean, you know how it goes with this covering this team. Sometimes it's just because nobody asked. Nobody asked about Gifford.
Well, he hasn't.
So then we say they're not talking to him. They're not talking about him, and they're talking about, I don't know, Omar Brown, maybe because just somebody asked about him. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't always matter that much. Now, there are names they volunteer, though. Those are the ones. That's why I always say those are the ones to me that are most
the unsolicited mentions.
Yeah, those are really meaningful.
That means the coach went up there with a point to talk about that guy.
All right, when we come back, Abby Barmer will join us. We'll take your questions here in the mailbag. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Let's welcome in Abby Barmore as we've got a full mailbag here as we sit about a week away or so from the red-white spring game. Abby, where are you starting us off with in the mailbag?
All right. Speaking of the spring game, what name do you think will emerge from the spring game that we haven't been talking about?
Oh, boy.
That's a tough one.
Who haven't we talked about?
Okay.
Same with every spring.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let's think about this.
Because we've already covered some of these like walk-on receivers.
I will say this. Fedoni hasn't come up that much lately. He did last time. Forget that one. Scratch. Is there any those receivers that we don't talk about much? This question is really falling flat. Abby, have you noticed?
We're just trying to
keep
the
one guy Garrett McGuire mentioned was Sean Hardy.
Okay.
Saying he's one of those guys that has been getting a lot of extra reps, especially with Billy Kemp's workload. So if you talk about spring emergers, like the rando spring game guy that catches 7 balls for 82 yards and a touchdown.
The Krinsky-Gillian spring game guy.
Sean Hardy is a good name. That's a good name.
What was that running back, Butler, back in the
Butler.
He had like back-to-back 100-yard spring games.
Then
Chris Butler.
Chris Butler then transferred.
And then he started for Auburn.
Transferred to Auburn.
That's how good Nebraska's running backs were.
Did he start for Auburn?
Yeah, he played for Auburn, played a lot for him.
Okay. I didn't know that, but I distinctly remember the transfer date.
All right, I'll throw out the quarterbacks. I mean, what about like Chubba Purdy and Richard Torres? Could like one of those guys at least flash?
Yeah, Torres. I mean, we haven't seen much of Torres. That would be interesting. That would be certainly interesting.
All right, next question.
Do you think there's any chance that Matt Rule will utilize a 2 quarterback system?
No.
Not really.
I just don't. I mean, Frost tried to do it a little bit with McCaffrey and Martinez, and it kind of destroyed the season. I mean, the Illinois game was one of the worst home losses. They were like 13-point favorites, and they got embarrassed.
Go ahead and say it. It was one of the worst home losses you've ever seen. It was.
It really was, considering the context of what that was.
I mean, I watched the game mostly with my mouth agape. I couldn't believe what was going on. They come on.
And then they put Martinez in late, and he just started like lighting up. I mean, like he had done his whole career against Illinois.
Yeah, like literally the best games of his career were against Illinois, and they were messing around putting McCaffrey in there.
A 2 quarterback system. I don't see Rule doing it. Rule's sort of old school in a lot of ways. Just doesn't fit his mold.
Could you be gimmicky with Heinrich Harburg?
Yes,
as a red zone runner.
Yeah, you could be gimmicky that way, but I don't consider that a 2 quarterback system.
No, that's not a system. No. That's
just sticking
packages.
Yeah. Packages for Heinrich. Yeah, I could see that.
Remember schools like Missouri when they had Brad Smith and Chase Daniel was there, and they would give like Chase Daniel a design series every half.
Yeah.
But I mean, look who they had, you know. I mean, those were
I don't think we'll see a 2 quarterback system. And even the package with Heinrich is just idle speculation.
Right. All right, what do you got next?
With Nebraska losing out on a couple of offensive linemen in the 500-mile radius, where does that recruiting area stand, and how many O-line and D linemen do you think they'll take in the 2024 class?
Well, they took 6 last year, so they
Six
took
what?
linemen, offensive linemen.
Offensive
so
linemen.
their number is huge. I mean, when you add Mason Goldman, Jason Machacek, Sam Sledge, Gunnar Gatula, Brock Knutson, and I'm missing one other one in there, but I mean that's a lot of linemen in one year. So I think the number is probably around 4 at the most, 3 or 4
O linemen.
Yeah, and they have Gibson Pyle, and Grant Bricks has to be a priority out of Logan Magnolia, Iowa right now. That to me, that's a guy that they have to lock up. But Andrew Sprague to Michigan out of Kansas City Rockhurst, it's a blow. He had been here 3 times, but you kind of had a feeling it was going that direction. I think the shocker still remains Gage Ginther, who we believe is the number 1 player in the state of Colorado, just based on his recruiting attention and offers. I think we've got him at number 2 on 3 right now. But he's got better offers than the guy ranked ahead of him.
Yeah.
So
who's going to Kansas State?
You just wonder the Gage Ginther thing to Tennessee. That was tough because it felt very good for Nebraska with Gage Ginther.
Yeah, his dad played at UNK. He was a corner at UNK, and his dad's a huge Husker fan. And Ginter was here, and the vibe was good. It seemed like he was engaged, and then all of a sudden, Tennessee, which has a thriving NIL operation, paying that quarterback. I was reading on 3 that they recruited that quarterback. I'm not going to try his name, but $8 million is their talk. They threw out $8 million in a published report.
Nico, is that the?
Yeah, I'm a lever or something like that. I think that's how you put it.
Over his career, but that's a lot of money. I mean,
Amaliva, which is an apt name for this time period, because if he doesn't play enough, it'll be Amaliva, Tennessee for someone else.
Those deals, though, there's a lot of red tape, and I don't put a lot of stock.
Folks.
Sorry,
I don't put a lot of stock in those kind of deals out there.
You don't?
I mean, I just
$8 million.
I think
I don't either, Sean.
That's outrageous.
That's crazy. But it was on a published report. I'm just saying. On 3 published. In fact, it was a really good story about this week's spring games, April 15th spring games, and talking about 5-star quarterback.
Rashada.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Rashada, Arizona State. But yeah. And they put that $8 million figure on Amaliva.
All right, Abby.
All right.
I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name either, but it sounds funny. Go ahead.
All right, next one, kind of difficult. What Nebraska team do you think will win a Big Ten championship first? Men's basketball or football?
Big Ten championship?
Yep.
Just outright conference?
I mean, you probably have to say football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just winning the Big Ten is like winning the national championship. Like that's what I mean. Like if you win the Big Ten in basketball, you're a 1 seed. Purdue is a 1 seed.
Yep.
If you win it in football, Ohio State and Michigan made the playoffs this year.
And with football, all you have to do is win your division.
And then the divisions are going to be
well,
gone,
yeah, okay.
It's
for
a
the
tough
time
question.
being.
I mean,
It's a hard question.
It is.
It is.
It's kind of like if you win the lottery, you're going to take the annual payments or the one lump sum. I mean,
what I would like
to
be able to say is it doesn't seem that far fetched, but right now it just seems incredibly far.
Yeah,
fetched
I mean,
on both counts.
You have to really talk yourself into either one of them at this point.
Right.
It's just not even realistic talk until Nebraska shows progress to get to that level.
Yeah, and the big dogs are. I mean, you just look at Penn State. Nobody talks about Penn State. Nobody, and they've had 4 11-win seasons since 2016
because they can't beat those 2 other teams.
Right, but think about that. During Nebraska's struggle since 2016, Penn State 3 11-win seasons. I mean, nobody talks about them on that side.
They made multiple New Year's 6 bowl games.
Yeah, they just won the Rose Bowl. I mean, but it's Michigan's really rolling. I mean, some people are picking Michigan to win it all this year, and they'll have a great chance. They have that kind of roster.
All right, Abby. It looks like we got 2 more questions.
All right, next one. Is the singular focus on Dylan Raiola a mistake that will end up backfiring on Nebraska, as other 2024 quarterback targets are being wooed elsewhere, while Nebraska waits and could ultimately lose Raiola?
My question back is, what do you do? Do you just because you have to keep recruiting him, and so what do you tell Daniel Kalen? Yeah, we're going to take you, but if Raiola comes here, we're going to dump you. So Nebraska. I mean, if Nebraska said we're just going to stop recruiting Dylan Raiola because we don't think we're going to get him, but you still are in the conversation with them. I mean, that would
keep recruiting him.
You keep recruiting
and if you don't get him, there's a very convenient thing they call the transfer portal.
Yep.
And that's where you go.
They have 6 scholarship quarterbacks right now. It's not like they're short on quarterbacks in this program.
It's not a big problem. Not a problem. I wouldn't worry about that at all.
No.
I wouldn't if I were Rule.
No. And the reward far outweighs the risk, in my opinion. Just because if you put all your chips on him and you get him, holy cow, you just got yourself a program quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, like you just mentioned, you already got a bunch of guys you can work with on your roster, and there's a transfer portal, and there's other quarterbacks on the market.
That's it. And I bet you Matt Rule's answer would largely mirror what we just said.
All right, final question, Abby Barmer.
All right, it's finally warming up and starting to feel like spring. So what is your favorite season?
Not winter.
I'm a fall guy. I mean, you just cannot. I feel like the weather in Nebraska in the fall is its best because you get a little bit of summer. And it doesn't really start to get cold until
October,
even December now.
Yeah.
I mean, November's been a relative. I mean, other than the Wisconsin game this year,
we've had some nice Novembers. You're right.
Like you're mowing your lawn damn near in November still. And
I'm still riding a hog in November at times. I am on Saturdays. I mean, on there was that open Saturday. I was riding comfortably.
I love a night game Saturday because then you just have all morning Saturday to sit around and just go on a walk, enjoy the day a little bit. Fall weather.
I don't think there's any question that in Nebraska, fall is the best season. For one, there's football, but the weather is pristine. And I'll go beyond. I'll say the best month is October, when it's finally starting to get just chilly enough. You just slap a hoodie on, but you don't need a coat.
Right.
You wear jeans and a hoodie. Watch a weekend full of football. I mean, it does not get.
I've seen it. I've seen Robin do it. I've seen Robin in a hoodie watching football.
You don't call
it happens
Robin
quite frequently. Yes.
Well, think about just our fall, like on these road trips. We went to West Lafayette. Just how glorious that weekend was in West Lafayette.
Beautiful.
Glorious might be a little much.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I got to say.
I opened the room in my hotel room in the Purdue Union courtyard. It was like the courtyard of the Purdue Union, and there were kids outside throwing footballs around. It was just like picturesque.
God, you're right. You're right. Walking to the game, it was crisp.
They had a bottle of wine. I won't try to pronounce the name of that bottle.
Prosecco.
I called it prosciutto last time. It's a bad beat.
Much different South Elf. That's how they pronounce it in South Omaha.
Prosecco.
Prosciutto.
All right, Ramir. I'll get Tominaga on my butt.
The winter this year about did me in. That 50 below thing about did me in. It about did me in.
Yeah. Abby, below. What's yours?
I got to go with fall too. The weather is great, but then also when you factor in football and volleyball season, it just really levels it up.
Now those like 3 days of just elite 70-degree spring weather that we get. I mean, those are fantastic.
Like this week.
Yeah. So cherish them while they're here. Today, April 11th, was the first 80-degree day.
Oh, thank you, Robin.
Year.
Thank you.
Wow.
Get ready.
80.
Well, the spring's weird too because there's always like some sort of fire in Kansas, and it brings up like smoke. And
intentional fires.
With like 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts.
Like I went out to take my garbage out last night, and you could just smell burning.
Yeah,
I mean,
interesting.
Come in, feel like you smoked a pack of Marlboro Reds.
Yeah, it's bad for people with asthma and various conditions.
Allergy.
Yeah,
terrible
really
place for allergies.
Yeah, you really got to watch that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that
stay inside.
Old man fall discussion, but when we come back, lots of action in the basketball transfer portal visit, some in-state names involved. We'll get Robin's thoughts on that to close the show. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washad. It's been a fun one, boys.
Yeah.
Well,
it has been strangely fun.
Let's close it out with some transfer portal basketball talk because it's hot and heavy right now. And there's really, and I mean this sincerely, there's really only about one guy in Nebraska to follow for this. It's Robin Washad. He's got his finger on the pulse of what's happening. And there's so many daily moving pieces happening right now. Robin, just start us off with the basics. How many transfers could Nebraska take this year? Where are the needs? And then kind of give us an idea of maybe who could be coming in.
Yeah, as it stands right now, they have 4 open scholarships. The only signee they currently have is Eli Rice, the kid from IMG Academy that signed in the fall. But there could be more than 4. There's still maybe 1 or 2 guys that could potentially leave when all's said and done that could open up even more spots. And so with the flurry of visitors that have already been confirmed right now, that known visitors that have been confirmed: Pitt transfer big man John Hughley, Siena point guard JV McCollum, Charlotte guard transfer Bryce Williams was here this past weekend on an official visit. We can talk more about him later. And then the most recent one that happened just before taping today, Latrell Wrightsell Jr., former Omaha Central standout, Cal State Fullerton guard, narrowed his list down to 3, with Nebraska, Minnesota, and Alabama being the list. So he's gonna be at Nebraska on Friday, I believe, and then he's going to visit the other 2 next week. So some interesting developments. Obviously Hunter Salas, Gonzaga, Miller North standout. He's very much in the mix. Nebraska was out there to see him on Sunday, working on locking in an official visit with him. And so there's a lot of moving parts, but those are the known visits or potential visits that are on the radar right now.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, this, when you step back and look at the off seasons now, how critical this conversation is to Fred Hoiberg.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going into season 5, no NCAA tournament appearances, no NIT appearances. And it's on one hand, there's pressure. On another hand, it's exciting. I mean, it looks like he could put together a pretty good roster still.
Yeah.
You've mentioned it though, Rob. He's got to close deals.
Yeah. We talked about this on your show,
Right.
On the ticket, where on paper right now, that visitor list looks pretty good. And
Really?
if they get a good chunk of that, all of a sudden you can talk yourself into next season being something
Better
for them.
Over 500.
Yeah. And over 500, then you're really in that postseason potential bubble picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the positive of it. The other end of it is you're once again bringing a lot of new pieces. And last year they were able to mesh those because they had the right leadership.
Yeah.
But the past 3 years when they tried to do that, it was disaster where it never meshed. So can this new staff continue from a culture aspect, what they did over the past year, and not just bringing in quality players, but getting the right types of guys that fit together and accompany one of each other, complement each other on the floor, to where it's not just a bunch of individuals, you're assembling a team. And so I didn't answer your question. Point guard remains a priority. I would expect him to take at least 2 bigs.
2 bigs.
Yes, because we can talk about more of this later, but I'm keeping an eye on Blaise Keita. His ankles, I don't know. It's taken a long time for those to heal. So I think you need depth, especially after losing Oleg Koyanets and Derek Walker. They need some bigs just for depth purposes. So that, and then shooters, that's where like a Bryce Williams who shot 40% from 3 would be a real valuable asset. So I would put bigs, just because you need 2 of them, right up there at the top of the list. Point guard is maybe 1B, and then shooters are right behind that for what you need. And then what does the rest of your roster look like as far as maybe more potential movement out? We'll see when you cross that bridge. But fun times. It's been a lot to try to keep track of.
Fun times is watching Bryce Williams on tape. I mean, Bryce Williams, now I get it. You said he'd be like 3rd priority. When I watch him,
a very close 3rd priority.
Yeah, this guy, Sean, this guy is a serious shooter. I mean, he's a serious shooter. He's 6'7", has a beautiful looking shot, can get it off, has a good mid-range game.
Yeah. So when the portal opened,
from
everything that I heard was that Jamison Battle, the Minnesota transfer, 6'8", 3-point shooter, they loved him, and he was like Nebraska staff.
Nebraska, okay.
And they were he was their number 1 guy. Obviously, he went committed to Ohio State. Bryce Williams, I think, is that same mold, where he's big, long, can defend, can play multiple positions, and can be a mismatch offensively because of his 3-point shot. So
he's not just a 3-pointer shooter. No, he's a good offense. I mean, he is a very good offensive player.
He can rebound too.
Yeah.
And so, you get a piece like that. That's an awfully good start. And like I said, he was here this past weekend, and that visit went as well as you could expect. There's a chance he might go see another school. I haven't heard anything about who that school might be. So I like where Nebraska stands. And people wonder if there's to be a potential commit watch. I would keep my eye on it.
And I think
shocked. Nebraska's in a good spot.
I'd be shocked if he's not 13 points a game next year. Shocked.
That's what he averaged at Charlotte.
Yeah, he looks like that type of guy.
Robin, with Hunter Salas, I mean, what's your read on that? We know Fred Hoiberg was out there over the weekend. Could Nebraska get an official visit at Hunter Salas?
I think they can, and I think it's likely they will, just with the way things are going. And what's interesting is when this process started, I don't know where Nebraska actually stood with Hunter.
Right.
Like, I don't know how legitimate of an option they were, and I honestly don't know where Nebraska's interest was. I think maybe they had some questions too, but I think as this process has gone and more communication has been had, and especially after that in-home visit on Easter Sunday, things have escalated on both sides to where I think Nebraska is very much a legitimate option for Hunter Salas. And I think Hunter Salas is very much a legitimate target for Nebraska. So that being said, we'll see I think he's going to take it through this week to see, who else he talks with. Wake Forest and Steve Forbes, their head coach, and his staff were up in Spokane the day before on Saturday for an in-home visit. They are a team to watch. Ed Cooley, former Providence coach, now at Georgetown. Georgetown is a school to watch there. But what do those schools offer that Nebraska can't?
Why does he want to go to Wake and just disappear from the face of the earth? I mean, because that's what's going to happen.
He could really be a star at Nebraska.
At Nebraska, he could come here and be a
Be
star,
a legend, a local legend.
NIL.
Now, there's people are going to say, Sipple, you're out of your mind. Wake's in the ACC. You don't drop off the face of the earth in the ACC. I don't know.
ACC's fallen off as a league, though.
Yeah, and who pays attention to Wake? I'd be. Why would you?
The best team in the ACC was Miami this year, and they bought their roster, and that was.
So anyway, that
am I off base there?
No, well, if you want to talk about individual player celebrity, his by far best opportunity is Nebraska.
Right.
There's zero question.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So to your point, yes. And so that's what I think. Like those schools obviously have a lot more basketball tradition.
They do.
But what more do they offer? And they both have new coaches. So like all that.
Come on.
Anyway, so yes, to your question, Sean, yes, I do think Nebraska has a very good chance of bringing him on an official visit. And if you're looking at a potential target date, I would keep an eye on the spring game. I think that could be a big visit weekend for Nebraska.
Boy, Rob, I mean, that is a fascinating rundown. Your job is incredible. Rob.
Oh, we haven't even talked about another big. You want to talk about
Bradley?
bigs? Rank Mast from the Netherlands via Bradley.
Bradley.
He's basically like a version of Derek Walker. He's not quite the ball handler, but he's a much better shooter. And I don't know if you've watched it yet. Watch this film and watch that little jump hook.
Little baby
It'll
hook.
be a sight for those eyes.
How would you like to be a mid-major coach right now in college basketball?
Okay, so it works both ways. You get the guys like that are leaving, but you also get the runoffs. The guys
coming down.
Yeah.
You get guys coming down.
So you
that's
get
kind of a
high
trade,
major players that couldn't cut it at the Power 5 or whatever you want to call it level that you can replace with. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, lots to keep up on. Make sure you stay with Robin Washut. We'll have spring practice, obviously, throughout the weekend. Baseball, big home series against Northwestern. Hopefully, Nebraska can get the sweep against the Wildcats, who have had a lot of problems this year.
Yeah, well, they got rid of their hitting coach, their pitching coach, and their ops guy.
Other than that,
they're playing.
Sean,
you could go over there and coach third, probably, for one.
Just show up.
I'd be sending a lot of guys home. But HuskerOnline.com, we got a great special right now. You can subscribe right now. $29.99 get you access until August 31st. Make sure you download our podcast anywhere you can find podcasts, or like and follow us here on YouTube.